Hello there, friend, and welcome to the second week of February. It's episode 285 of Stand Up. It's the day after the Super Bowl as I'm recording this opening. My guest today is comedian, cultural commentator, lawyer, J.L. Cauvin. I am Pete Dominic. It's time to stand up with me right now. Hello, and thank you for pressing play and maybe starting your day with me or listening at some point during your life to Stand Up and my voice. I'm Pete Dominic. This is a daily show where every day we learn together about the news and issues that we are dealing with and facing and how to become a better person. I'm a curious guy. I got a lot of smart friends, including you, and I'm so happy to have you joining me along the ride, the journey that we call life. Taping the show as I do almost every episode from the shed. And today it's covered another 6 inches of bright white snow. And I love it. I hope you saw the picture I shared on social media yesterday of the shed covered in snow. This is where I love to be, talking to the smartest people I can find and always connecting with you. The last time I did the show was Thursday. Last Thursday, I had Dr. Aaron Carroll on, and then I went skiing on Thursday with my brother and my daughters. We had a great time. Came back Thursday night to hang out with a whole bunch of listeners, subscribers of the stand-up community, as I do every Thursday at 8 p.m., and it was great, as always, to see you there. I hope you had a great weekend. And did you watch the Super Bowl? Do you care about football at all anymore? Did you watch it for the commercials? Val actually came down and watched it with me. I made my signature nachos, and we devoured those, and it was fun. I enjoyed having her on the couch with me to watch sports, which is something that almost never happens, and she wasn't really watching the game, but I was, and it was a massive blowout where Tom Brady and now his Tampa Bay Buccaneers destroyed Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, and he won his, 7th Super Bowl? He played in his 10th Super Bowl. The guy is the greatest American football player ever to live. A lot of people hate him. I don't care about his politics. I don't think he's seriously a Trump supporter anyway. I think he's a pretty liberal, open-minded, thoughtful guy, but I really just don't care. I'm impressed with his athletic record. I'm impressed that his team that he had won all those Super Bowls and gone to all those playoff games with, the New England Patriots. I don't actually know the story. I don't pay that close attention to sports, but they didn't re-sign him, and he didn't want to retire, even though he's like 57 years old, and he decided to keep on playing. He's not that old. And he went and signed a contract with another team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I don't know, I guess it's kind of identified with that when SiriusXM let me go and then started a podcast from my garage and then came out here and renovated the shed. And, to anybody who their job, their boss, whatever, let them go and you came back stronger. I guess that's what I identify with. And I think a lot of other people were talking about that kind of storyline as well. Later on, I'll have some commercials from the Super Bowl that I want to play and get your reaction to, of course. And right now, I want to play for you a few clips from the Sunday shows and what I call the first segment here, the last 24. And I guess this is the last 72 because I hadn't done a show since Friday. But generally speaking, right here, this is the most robust news clip you can get on any daily podcast, entirely produced and hosted by me. All right, here we go. Let's start with Joe Biden, who sat down with Norah O'Donnell on CBS for the halftime show, the network that gets the Super Bowl, always generally, I think, also scores an interview with the president, because that's a huge stage for the president, whoever it is, to be on. And so President Joe Biden sat down with Norah O'Donnell for a conversation and interview, and here's a short clip about when to reopen schools. They were sitting like 30 feet apart, I suspect, in the White House.
Let's turn to schools.
Sure.
About 20 million American children have not been in the classroom for nearly a year. There's a mental health crisis happening.
There really is.
Women are dropping out of the workforce. Is this a national emergency?
It is a national emergency. It generally is a national emergency.
Do you think it's time for schools to reopen?
I think it's time for schools to reopen safely. You have to have fewer people in the classroom. You have to have ventilation systems that have been reworked. Our CDC commissioner is going to be coming out with science-based judgment within, I think, as early as Wednesday as the layout, what the minimum requirements are.
It's so hard with kids not being able to play sports now. A lot
It really
of kids.
is. I think about the price so many of my grandkids and your kids are going to pay for not having had the chance to finish whatever it was. That graduation where you didn't get to walk across the stage. I think they're going through a lot, these kids.
President Biden with CBS's Norah O'Donnell, showing empathy, showing that he understands both the problem, the impact, and what the wide range of solutions need to be. Of course, a very controversial issue. Teachers, and my heart goes out to all of you who are educators. I'm psyched to have any of you who are teachers listening, and all of the parents, especially with younger kids that have been struggling working from home. And it sounds like your president is listening and cares too. These are tough issues, obviously. All right, now what I have for you is just a Sunday news show cyclone of senators and cabinet secretaries and more. A real potpourri, a back and forth, a ping pong of sound. Here we go. From CNN, Fox News, CBS, NBC, and ABC. Here we go with Senator and massive asshole from Kentucky, Rand Paul, on Fox News Sunday.
Are we going to impeach and potentially criminally prosecute people for political speech? I think you're going to see the Trump defense play video of Maxine Waters telling crowds to mob Trump administration in restaurants and attack them. They'll probably show clips of Cory Booker saying, "Get up in their face" of these Congress people. You'll probably see comments from Representative Omar wishing and celebrating the violence that happened to me when I had 6 ribs broken and part of my lung removed.
All right, now here is Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, also on Fox News Sunday, answering that.
There is no comparison. This was an effort to overturn an election, in and of itself an unconstitutional endeavor.
Now back to the dark side.
There's going to be so much evidence that the president had nothing to do with this.
And now back to truth and reality.
The president had access to intelligence to tell him that there were individuals there who were intending to storm the Capitol. The president had the ability to turn them around, and he didn't. And
now back to evil, but also reality.
Zero chance of conviction. 45 Republicans have said it's not even a legitimate proceeding, so it's really over before it starts.
Now on to Lady G on CBS Face the Nation.
I'm ready to end the impeachment trial because I think it's blatantly unconstitutional.
Now back to Senator Chris Murphy.
There's a lot of Republicans that feel differently. I think the conviction will be a bipartisan vote.
And now Dick Cheney's daughter, Liz, who makes sense all of a sudden on Fox News Sunday.
What we already know is enough for his impeachment. What we already know does constitute the gravest violation of his oath of office by any president in the history of the country.
A little more from Chris Murphy. Hit it again, Chris.
The Senate's going to do all 3 things next week. We're going to do our constitutional responsibility and hold a trial. It won't last very long. We are going to move forward nominees, and we are going to continue to push forward COVID relief legislation.
And now George Stephanopoulos talks to new Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg about getting rid of the filibuster to get things done.
But if that's what it takes to pass the bill, lowering the threshold, it's worth it?
The bottom line is we've got to support as many Americans as we can, as robustly as we can, and as quickly as we can. Time is of the essence.
And now the excitement of the Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, who's on CBS's Face the Nation.
The American Rescue Package that President Biden has proposed really addresses the problems that women face, providing paid family and medical leave during this crisis so that women don't have to leave their jobs when they're faced with health issues or family issues.
Senator Bernie Sanders on CNN telling us he's going to show us that money.
We said we're going to get you $2,000, and that's $600 plus $1,400. Everybody, a single person, individual, $75,000 or lower, and a couple of $150,000 or lower will be eligible for that full $2,000.
Republican Senator Bill Cassidy on Meet the Press on NBC.
Because when there was a Republican president and Republicans controlled the Senate, we passed 5 different COVID relief packages on a bipartisan basis with overwhelming margins. We had shown that we would negotiate and come to answers.
Back to our Transportation Secretary, Buttigieg.
You got hardworking families out there. You got an ER nurse or a firefighter in that 60 range. I think it's really important that we are taking care of working families. That's obviously something that is being discussed.
Treasury Secretary Yellen, what do you say?
Struggling middle-class families need help too.
Buttigieg.
This is a moment where the greatest risk we could take, as the president has said, is not the risk of doing too much. It's the risk of doing too little.
And Republican Senator from Mississippi, Roger Wicker, on ABC News with George Stephanopoulos.
Do you think the president should be held accountable for his actions on January 6th?
If being held accountable means being impeached by the House and being convicted by the Senate, the answer to that is no.
And that is your Sunday news show cyclone here on the first segment of today's show. Whew! Wow, that was a lot. Okay, but now we need, I feel like a palate cleanser. How about Pema Chodron? Is that how you say her name? My therapist, Deborah Adamy, suggested refer her work to me years ago, and I've been reading and listening to her. And Val bought a 2021 calendar of nature pictures with Pema Chodron quotes. So here is Pema Chodron on what to do when you lose it completely.
So what kind of world are we creating? It's worth asking yourself this question, and it's not a question. It's more the question is, what kind of world am I creating? What am I adding to? Am I adding to this deep, unconditional love for self and other that is so healing? Or am I adding to polarization and aggression and even violence? It's really worth asking ourselves this. And then the approach here is so tender and forgiving that if I find myself about to go off on somebody, or right in the middle of it, I say, "Ooh, I am screaming here," or I just lost it completely, and I'm already slammed the door, and I'm standing out in the hall. I mean, wherever you are in the chain reaction of reactivity, you know, you can pause and just ask yourself, look what I'm doing. And then instead of denigrating yourself, instead of me criticizing myself, instead of me shaming myself, instead of me wallowing in guilt for the next 17 years, at least, there's this very forgiving quality which is epitomized by the Shambhala meditation, which is just feel the rage, feel the shame, feel the guilt, feel the remorse, feel the resentment, feel the heat, feel the fire, just as it is. Just as it is, just as it is. Not escalating further, not repressing, not turning it into something hard.
There you go. A Sunday news cyclone, all the craziness and politics, and then a chaser of peace and tranquility and mindfulness and how to deal with a temper tantrum as an adult right there. Pema Chodron, I love that. And speaking of which, I don't know if you saw this. I wasn't going to say anything, and I don't want you to watch it. It's pretty traumatizing, and I don't know why a morbid part of me made me want to watch it several times, but I did this morning. The video from Scranton, Pennsylvania, where neighbors were arguing over somebody was shoveling snow on the other person's property, and the guy came out with a gun and shot a husband and a wife to death. He killed them. Their 15-year-old kid was inside. He went back in and got a long gun. First, he shot him with a pistol, and then he came back out with a rifle and shot him more, and the whole video was captured. And I watched it. What is wrong with me? I bring that up to you just to remind folks of how precious life is and how quickly it can end. And more importantly, back to that Pema Chodron quote that I just played for you, calm down. And I'm talking to myself. There is really not a lot gained by losing your temper, especially when you're screaming at complete strangers or neighbors. So note to self, and just a horrible, horrible tragedy coming out of Scranton, Pennsylvania. By the way, the guy then went inside, paced around, and killed himself. I didn't even mention that, the shooter. Terrible story. All right, so moving on, I want to share with you some of the Super Bowl commercials, which were weird because none of them, I mean, there was I think a commercial honoring, I think from the NFL honoring the essential workers, frontline workers, etc. But all of the commercials didn't seem to take in consideration masking and social distancing and the virus and the pandemic. And that was jarring for a lot of people. Chris Hayes of MSNBC wrote, admittedly, we're 11 months into a pandemic and we're all dyspeptic, but just about every single second of ad copy I've seen tonight has filled me with rage. All right, so I relate to that. I felt similar. I just felt like they missed a lot of the point. And I think this Jeep ad with Springsteen is, to some extent, guilty of that as well. I'll play it for you and give you some reaction from a bunch of people on the other side. Here it is, Bruce Springsteen for Jeep.
There's a chapel in Kansas, standing on the exact center of the lower 48. It never closes. All are more than welcome to come meet here in the middle. It's no secret. The middle has been a hard place to get to lately, between red and blue, between servant and citizen, between our freedom and our fear. Now, fear has never been the best of who we are. And as for freedom, it's not the property of just the fortunate few. It belongs to us all. Whoever you are, wherever you're from. It's what connects us, and we need that connection. We need the middle. We just have to remember the very soil we stand on is common ground. So we can get there. We can make it to the mountaintop, through the desert, and we will cross this divide. Our light has always found its way through the darkness. And there's hope on the road up ahead.
Oh, yeah. I want to believe that, boss. John Avalon wrote, yep. As you might imagine, I'm all about this. And not just because the game is brutal. And not just because it's Springsteen. Heidi Moore tweeted, I decided to keep liking Bruce Springsteen, despite that commercial. Paul Farhi, Washington Post media guy, wrote, you can tell this pretentious Springsteen commercial is off kilter. He's driving around Kansas in an open Jeep in the dead of winter. Plus the cowboy hat, come on. And David Spade tweeted, I can't believe I turned down a Super Bowl commercial and they gave it to Bruce Springsteen. On Twitter, I asked, what did you think of that Springsteen ad? How did we meet in the middle? How do we meet in the middle when the other side thinks Trump won the election, vaccines are the mark of the devil, and I eat babies? Several responses on that from folks. Kevin Gorman said, I'm all in on the Springsteen ad. We just need to find common ground with the open-minded conservative. They're out there. I have started that dialogue. Another guy responded, the first thing you can do is believe that everyone on the other side believes everything you just said. Every one of them. I don't know what that means. Ed Rooney said, be the change you want to see, my friend. Alan Preston wrote, just like Born in the USA, they'll probably misread it as pro-Trump and use it in commercials and in campaign propaganda. Margie tweeted, as a member of the left, I think we loved it, but curious if they actually focus group their target audience, or maybe they did. Somebody else tweeted, I guess I'm trying to figure out what we're supposed to stop doing. I like that. Yeah. What is it that we're doing? How do we meet in the middle with crazy people? Kim Giordano wrote, I thought it was a nice effort, but totally tone deaf. Another tweet, Bruce sold out. He doesn't need an advertiser to speak to the American people. And a couple of people responded to the fact that the middle somehow had a church in it. And Todd wrote, I was really put off by that ad. The copy was good. It would be a good radio ad. The imagery that the middle is rural, white, and Christian, which is either neither accurate or helpful, let alone the whole finding common ground with supporters of domestic terrorist stuff. So a huge reaction and wide-ranging reaction to the Bruce Springsteen Jeep ad. There you have it. Now, I really like the Cabela's ad. You need the imagery with it, but I still think the copy here is pretty good about getting outside, connecting with nature. Of course, this is an ad selling you shit and wanting you to kill fish, but I still liked it.
To everyone in our great outdoor family, you may be feeling a little cooped up, but don't forget, there are still rocks to be skipped, trails to be trampled, fish to be caught. The great outdoors are wide open, and they're calling us like never before. In these trying times, we need nature more than ever. We need nature to remind us that like a sunrise or the turning of the tides, these challenges will pass. We need nature to help us heal and reconnect with the ones we love the most. So when you can, get back to nature. Get back to each other. We're here for you.
Yeah, I like that. I like the message. And I love when you send me... Wow, that got creepy. I love when you send me your vitamin N pictures. If you're a subscriber to the Stand Up with Pete Dominic podcast, you get an email every day. As soon as I post it at night, you probably get it when you wake up in the morning. And there's a snapshot, a picture, a photograph from a listener, subscriber. Sometimes it's just somebody that sends it to me on Twitter using the hashtag vitamin N, which I stole or took from my mentor, Rich Louv, who is a great nature writer, of course, Last Child in the Woods. And so I love that ad, and I love the idea of getting out in nature, and I love how much more, I think, hopefully, people are, it seems, discovering nature and all things outdoors because of the pandemic and quarantine, and recognizing, realizing, or remembering how important vitamin N really is. So send your pictures, standupwithpete@gmail.com, or just direct message them to me on Twitter, and I'll post them in that daily email, the good ones at least. I think there are a couple of other good ads, some funny ads. I like the GM ad for the future of their electric vehicles with Will Ferrell. I thought that was very good. That aroused me, of course. But Maura Quint captures it, as she always does, with reality. At Behind Your Back, Maura tweeted, "I love how many people watch the Super Bowl for the commercials like, yes, capitalism, every other day you crush us under your brutal foot. But tonight you entertain us." Well said, Maura. Okay, so now it's time to get to the news dump.
Hey, partner, get yourself some of that news dump, bruh.
Thank you, Jason Moe down in Louisiana. Submit your news dump sound now. All right, not politics, not COVID, not covered well enough. It's the news dump. Let's start in Australia, where after weeks of drama and setback, the Australian Open tennis tournament has begun. Thousands of tennis fans descending on Melbourne Park to watch the big tennis spectator match. What am I saying? I don't know. The Australian Open has begun. Spectator match. Anyway, the Australian Open organizers expect up to 400,000 fans attend the tournament this year in a socially distanced manner, around half the number that were at last year's competition. Australia's doing pretty good against COVID. It's almost normal, as a matter of fact. Former Secretary of State George Shultz has died at the age of 100, and so has former boxer Leon Spinks, who actually beat Muhammad Ali. He also passed away, as did former Indiana First Lady Susan Bai, who died at age 61. Wow. What is this, the obituaries in the news dump? Sorry about that, but I just thought I'd mention it because I saw all three here. An avalanche in Utah killed 4 backcountry skiers. That's awful. Victims were all in their 20s. One of the deadliest avalanches in Utah history, according to the Associated Press. All right, I think that's enough death for the news dump. Mentioned this story on the Zoom and on our Zoom Hangout Thursday night and on the show last week, but country music singer Morgan Wallen was caught on video using the N-word, and it looked like everything was going to come crashing down for him. Radio stations quit playing his music, his recording contract was suspended, and the Academy of Country Music announced he won't be part of this year's awards. But even as these institutions were punishing the guy, fans were rewarding him. He sold 1,000 albums on Tuesday. On Wednesday, sales topped 8,000. And he posted download song sales of 4,000 on Tuesday, then 14,000 on Wednesday. His online streams didn't suffer after being taken off Apple Music and Spotify podcasts. The fans are not backing away from him. If anything, they're leaning in, according to one industry insider. So I guess he's not getting canceled after all. I wonder if he learned his lesson or if others will, which is say the N-word out loud all the time and your record sales will go through the roof because we are racist as hell. Or as, I guess, a rejection of cancel culture, but still, I found that pretty depressing and surprising. Inmates in a St. Louis jail set fires caused flooding, broke out fourth-floor windows, and tossed stationary bike, chairs, mattresses, and other objects out of the building Saturday in a protest and disturbance over coronavirus conditions and restrictions that have limited visits and stalled court proceedings, officials said. Dozens of law enforcement officers worked for hours before bringing the riot at St. Louis City Justice Center under control shortly before 10 a.m. A man's missing earphone, his earbud, was found in his esophagus. That's right. A guy named Brad Gauthier of Worcester, Mass. detailed his bizarre experience in a Facebook post. He went to bed Monday listening to music. He woke up Tuesday, shoveled snow for about an hour, then went inside to take a sip of water. The liquid wouldn't go down, and he had to lean over to drain it from his throat. What? He also noticed he's missing one of his two wireless buds that he usually uses to fall asleep. His son then suggested maybe he swallowed it, which is exactly what an x-ray at a local emergency room revealed. The earbud was lodged in his lower esophagus. Doctors removed the earbud during an emergency endoscopy. Guy said he never had anything more than a minor discomfort. Yeah, maybe you shouldn't sleep with your earphones in, but how the hell did he eat it? How did he eat his earphone? And my friend, old friend, former governor of Minnesota, former wrestler, Governor Jesse Ventura. Pete, I don't think there should be allowed to be so many millionaires and billionaires. My Jesse Ventura impression needs work. He says it's time for a maximum wage. $12 million a year is enough for anyone, the former governor and wrestler said. So he thinks the maximum wage should be $12 million. He says, if you can't live on $12 million a year, $1 million a month, maybe we should bring back capital punishment. I love it. Jesse Ventura. And Armie Hammer, the actor, has now been dropped by his talent agency because of graphic social media messages detailing abuse. The Hollywood Reporter says the latest development of a career in free fall. Armie Hammer now without a talent agency a week after his exit from The Offer, a movie about the making of The Godfather. Now he's been dropped by his agency. I guess there's more messages that are coming out, including fantasies of rape, abuse, and cannibalism. Publicist has ditched him. Wow, the canceling of Armie Hammer. What do you think of that? Do we care? Is this a big deal? What are your thoughts? All right, that is your news dump for Monday, February 8th. And send me your news stories to standupwithpete@gmail.com and record a now it's time for the news dump and send that along as well. And maybe I'll use it on the show. Have your kids do it. Somebody did that. I got to find that one. Okay, now it's time to get to my first and only guest today. Usually I have a couple guests, but I had an issue with a guest audio, and I got to fix that, and it's going to take forever. And JL Cauvin and I talked for almost an hour, so I wanted to share that with you. It's always great talking to him. We've been talking almost every Sunday, and so it's almost like you can count on him on Monday, but I don't want to be able to necessarily count on anybody. I didn't get to Christian Finnegan last Friday because I took, of course, the day off, but I am excited that JL Cauvin is joining me. We had another really great conversation. I love talking to him. I think he's such a super smart guy and obviously a hilarious and very talented comedian who you can see. He's got a couple of shows that he's promoting that he mentions at the end here, but just go to jlcauvin.com and you can hire JL for a private Zoom or Cameo. But February 13th, he's doing a stand-up show at 5 p.m. Eastern. Anybody can join, but it's 5 p.m., $10 a person for that. February 15th, a President's Day farewell show with Trump. Join JL Cauvin for a President's Day farewell show on Monday, February 15th at 7 p.m. JL and I talked about QAnon, we talked about football, we talked about cancel culture, and more, as we always do. Another fascinating, enlightening, thought-provoking conversation with JL Cauvin, who is a 17-year stand-up comic, veteran, celebrity, political impersonator, and, of course, best known for his Trump. He's been on Mark Maron, Howard Stern, The Late Late Show, The Adam Carolla Show, and so many other things. Follow him on Twitter at Cauvin. Listen to both of his podcasts, and here is our conversation where I was just asking him about the reaction to his My Pillow Mike Lindell impression, what people thought about it.
Universal praise.
Everybody loves your Lindell. Is anybody else?
You get a few, when you spread it to YouTube and TikTok, you get some woman trashed it on TikTok. And then I looked at her page. She said, "This is so stupid." And then I looked at her page and she had 3 total videos ripping Joe Biden. And I was like, okay, if you feel the need to step in and defend Mike Lindell, at least I'll give them credit. If you're defending Trump because you liked his presidency, that's one thing. But throwing that equal vigor behind supporting Mike Lindell seems a little stupid.
Is anybody else doing a Lindell?
Beck Bennett did it for SNL just because I think he's sort of like a utility man for them. Yeah. I think when they don't have somebody to do something, they're just like, Beck, you're sort of mildly manly. You be Mike Lindell.
J.L. Cauvin and I sitting down just before the kickoff of the Super Bowl, and you haven't watched football since the whole scandal over Colin Kaepernick, or you haven't watched it with any kind of enthusiasm. But did you ever like it? I mean, we know you're an NBA fan, but are you that turned off by that situation that you stopped watching it?
I did watch 2 of the last 3 or 2 of the last 4 Super Bowls. I ended up kind of getting sucked in halfway through. I haven't watched a regular season game since Kaepernick was blackballed. No, I'm a Steelers fan, and I've had a series of unfortunate incidents involving the NFL. When I went to, I'm going to use a triggering word. Please don't treat me like Don McNeil Jr. of the New York Times, but I was at a Steeler game, my last Steeler game in 2009. My brother and I were basically making it almost like a yearly pilgrimage to a Pittsburgh. We're both Steeler fans to a Pittsburgh game. Nice day or weekend trip for the 2 brothers. And we're sitting in our section. And I remember just hearing various sort of veiled racist things, like they were playing the Browns. And I heard numerous people saying things like, "Get the Browns," and I'm not talking about kind of like a ha ha ha, we're making a racist joke, which shouldn't lose somebody their job or anything. I'm just saying, you got that feeling that there was this safe space for these cretins to kind of make racially tinged remarks. And then sometime in, I think it was the 2nd or 3rd quarter, I can't remember, it was the middle of the game, this group of 3 dudes in my section, young, probably a little younger, mid-20s, I would guess, sort of big, but one wearing a Santonio Holmes jersey, who is all white guys, Santonio Holmes being a very dark-skinned African-American player, yelled out is a little strong, but said enough for me to hear 3 rows behind him, "Tackle that nigger." This was 2009. At which point I said, "Hey, I do think there's some racism left in this country, despite the election of Barack Obama." Wow. And I remember my brother didn't hear it. And nobody in the, I felt like time froze for me because I just looked around. I was like, this dude just called Josh Cribbs of the Browns the N-word out loud, fearing no repercussion. And it wasn't that they were big. This is at a time when I was in very good shape and I wasn't afraid of a fight. But I just looked at my brother and I was like, "Did you hear this guy?" And then we were just sort of disgusted. It ruined the game. We didn't go to pick a fight. Yeah. And I wrote about it on my website many years ago, obviously. But I was just like, there's so much wrong with that incident that you go. And that's my experience has been, if me and my brother looked black, he looks sort of Derek Jeter black and I look ratty Italian. But if we both looked ostensibly black, I don't think we hear that. Do you know what I mean? I think this is kind of like, I'm in Pittsburgh. And maybe they would have said it not realizing, but I think my life experience has often been having to hear awful things and then choose, do I ruin the evening? Do I ruin the night out or whatever it is and take a stand? Or do I just swallow it and say, well, don't forget this? And so my point with that was with Kaepernick getting blackballed and seeing the reaction, the sort of this desire. It's the same thing with Trump, I think. It's an extension of Trump. What pervades in this country is this desire to almost find a way to shit on social justice or racial equality. And so when you find this guy, Colin Kaepernick, it became this, I'm annoyed with PC, political correctness. I'm annoyed with affirmative action. But I have this like avatar that I can use as this, my gripe for all things as an aggrieved white man. And I can use Kaepernick as this, like this thing that can represent all these things that annoy me. And that's why Trump used him. Trump would bring him up for no reason because he knew it was more than just football. It was angry white people being able to be like, yeah, I know he's saying one or two things, but I can make him about everything: football, flag, patriotism, race.
Well, I think there's also something about the idea that the NFL fan maybe doesn't think he or she has a quote racist bone in their body because they really root for these teams and they like these players, especially including the black and brown players. And then the other part of it is, hey,
and yet you can see a guy wearing a jersey of a black player on the Steelers calling a black player on the Cleveland Browns the N-word.
Yeah, it's
hard R out loud in 2009.
Yeah, it would be like wearing the jersey of some Randy Rainbow and then yelling the F word.
Yeah.
Being anti-gay. But the other idea just being that could you just leave your social justice movement, your anti-racism out of this one thing I enjoy, football Sundays? Could you not, please? Does it have to bleed into everything?
That what I find so weird about that is when people say, can you leave it out? It's like, why? Like, why do you want it left out? Like, why?
I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. It's exhausting to have to constantly hear about the injustice.
But it only goes one way because these are the same people that will retweet a John Voight message hailing Trump as some sort of messiah. So it only goes one way, and it only goes in ways that make them feel bad or question things. But I always find that funny to be like, can you leave it out of? It's like I don't even get why he's not stopping the game.
Well, the answer is I can't unzip my gender or my sexual orientation or the color of my skin. You can, I can't leave it out. It's in everything. It's everywhere. I'm sorry. I wish it weren't. It's not. I'm not the one that is constantly injecting it. I mean,
but I'm even saying it's not like Colin Kaepernick is going out on the field to play quarterback and then placing the ball down and going, I refuse. And his team gives up a touchdown. He's making a gesture before the game.
That would be, though, I think, a bigger move and a more bold move if in a fourth down situation and it's to win the game, he actually takes a knee against racism.
I've always thought
Can you really imagine? It would be the worst possible thing that could happen to civil rights.
I think he'd be in real danger of an assassination attempt. And I know that sounds crazy.
Taking a fall for a cause in sports. I don't think it's ever happened. I think the opposite happens is win, get on the podium and raise the fist. But right. I think it generally, most athletes are smart enough, those that care about these issues, to know that would be probably.
I always dreamed about a Super Bowl, and I know it'll never happen because you can't even get consensus among the players. I think a lot of quarterbacks really drop the ball in the NFL because the quarterback position is so far and away. It's the center of power as far as players are concerned. And I think if guys like Aaron Rodgers, who spoke sort of favorably on certain issues, if MVP level people like that had just said, I'm sitting out, they could have really changed. I think they could have really caused some deeper change.
By boycotting a game?
Something because I always thought, and it never happened, but I always thought, how earth shattering would it be if 1 year, maybe after Colin Kaepernick was blackballed, you had, two teams go, we're sitting out the Super Bowl. Like, can you imagine how that would wreak havoc on the economy of the sport? And like,
yeah, no, I mean, it would be a great thing on any issue, climate or anything else. But what do you think? You're a big NBA fan. And what's the difference there? What's the difference with the social justice, anti-racism movement within the NBA, where in fact they did sit out a game? Was it after George Floyd's death?
They delayed. I think the league sort of came to the decision that they would postpone games after a team had decided they weren't going to take the floor.
So that team deciding not to take the floor, I think in the playoffs, in fact.
No, I know what it was. No, that when that happened, the league sort of shut. The Floyd thing was sort of league wide, but it was when, and I pardon me for forgetting his name, was Jacob Blake. Was that the Wisconsin?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yep, the kid who got shot.
I believe, after Jacob Blake got shot. And the Milwaukee Bucks.
That's right. No, you got it. You got it. I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking about it. But my point is, what's the difference between the NBA? That's my question for you, and the NFL on this issue of Black Lives Matter and having it. You know, I mean, they seem to be wearing it and having it on the fields in the NFL. I feel like
I think it's a combination of factors. I think one factor is obviously the high percentage of African Americans in the NBA and in the power positions. LeBron James is basically, black Tom Brady in terms of his stature in the sport. Mm-hmm. And that alone helps. Like if Colin Kaepernick had won 4 Super Bowl rings.
Right. If he'd been Tom Brady.
And then done what he did, I'd be curious to see how he would be treated.
If Tom Brady had done anything, frankly.
Except have a MAGA hat in his locker.
Yeah.
But I think it's the racial breakdown and power of the players in the NBA. I think it's the fact that the NBA is a much more personable league because you're not covered up in equipment and gear and face masks. And I think it's also a sport that you just don't have as many good old boys enjoying
the fan following.
So the fan base is also much more supportive and or basketball. Either black or just more appreciative of black individuality. You get, you know what I mean? Like I think it's a total combination of factors. And the NBA has embraced the power of the players, which I think is a societal good, even if it's not great for players jumping from team to team in free agency on a whim.
Well, let me jump from sports to another subject, which is all the conversation in the past week, and then the action or lack of action by Republicans in the House on Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm not sure what you've been doing a lot of great comedy with Trump and Mike Lindell. Have you done anything with her, on her?
I did a call from Trump to her where he was assuring her that he formed the Space Force to go after the Jewish lasers.
Oh, good. I got to see that one. Maybe I'll play it later. But I wanted to get your take on what's happened there and how they seem to be more with her than Liz Cheney, and how we're still, in my opinion, seeing a lot of false equivalency, including by the mainstream, including the Sunday shows. I still feel like they are giving too much respect for Republicans in the House and Senate on negotiations on the rescue. But like, we still have to deal with the insurrection and the fact that Republicans aren't only, not going to vote to convict him in the Senate, but they're not even going to like slap her hand in the House. I mean, they took her, they wouldn't take her off the committees, the Democrats. And what do you make of what's happened and the conversation around it?
I think it's a disgrace. I think that's an easy way to put it, because it shows that the Republicans are in a trap of their own making. But unfortunately, as long as we have 50 states and the Electoral College, I think there is a level of protection that Republicans can depend on. I didn't even realize until I read it today that although Joe Biden destroyed Trump in the popular vote, if you divide 43,000 votes between Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin, Trump could have legitimately won the presidency. That's terrifying because it shows you that it gets more and more exaggerated. Joe Biden still could have won the popular vote by 7 million. And if you just take 40,000 votes out of that 7 million plus, he loses. And Republicans
I mean, Hillary won by 3 million votes in the popular vote.
No, of course. And it will only get, somehow I feel like it will only get worse. I think the next president, the next Democratic president could win by 9 million.
We got to turn Texas blue.
But it's on the easy answer is it's a disgrace. The Republican Party, other than a few people, I always say, and you will say, well, you have integrity, JL. But the truth is, there's no job. My comedy is my dream job. It is my dream job. It has been my entire pursuit of my adult life. And there are things that I won't do to preserve it or to get it. I just want to get it on my terms, what I consider the right way. And to me, when you look at these people in the Senate, the addiction to power, Senate and House, the addiction to power is so gross because these are all people who would be senior partners at law firms or $1 million lobbyists. It's not about feeding your kids or living a life of luxury. It's only about holding on to being called senator or representative. And I can't even try to comprehend that because there are certain things going on, whether it's climate, whether it's fairness and democracy, that seem like aren't these bigger than politics? And it's, and unfortunately they're not. Like climate to me, when I hear Ted Cruz getting up, and I know he's just craven and disgusting, but when I hear him talking about they're going to take jobs, like basically lying, like what are you, I would love to ask somebody like Ted Cruz, what are you, or maybe he wouldn't give me a straight answer. Maybe somebody a little less just selfish. What are you saying this for? Like, what do you have to gain? The jobs are growing in clean energy. We are facing a scientific global crisis. Why are you still talking
Because
this
environmentalism
shit?
is for cucks and pussies and homos. There is this kind of feminine quality somehow to sustainability and environmentalism. I mean, I don't see that, but because
Mother Nature has a puss.
Perhaps, but it's also
we need to call him Father Nature.
Father Nature rolls coal in his pickup truck and loves combustion engines and smokes.
But it's and I'm not giving you the full answer, but it's I don't understand anymore what even the point of the Republican Party is.
I was actually going to say that. What is their agenda? What is their platform?
The agenda is being in power. And I know people have said that already, but it's so bizarre at this point to be like, your economic theories have failed repeatedly. The earth is crumbling in part because of you. You are a faction in the most powerful country in the world. So you have outsized influence. You're not a fringe group in New Zealand. You are an obstruction in the most powerful country in the world. But I would just say, it's now, I'm very frustrated by it because it feels like, shouldn't we at this point, climate is such a good example where it's like the verdict is in. It's like 12 Angry Men where the guy's still fighting at the end. Like, no, this guy did it. Yeah. And eventually he quits. Spoiler alert for the 1950s drama. But he's the holdout because he's just committed to this, like, I think he did it and I have my own issues. And damn it, I don't care if you're showing me the truth.
Yeah.
That's where we're at with the Republican Party. And the fact that you have these psycho cult people. And I feel like I'm spewing cliches at this point because I see so many people say this on the left. But it's just, there is no hope for that party. And I think what I think should happen, which won't, is that guys like Adam Kinzinger and Mitt Romney and women like Lisa Murkowski, if they really, I shouldn't say if they really care, they have gone out on a limb. Mitt Romney, for all his flaws, history, I think, will rightfully view him as a hero, as somebody who stood up with principle at maybe not every time, but at the most dire times when no one else, he voted to remove Trump.
I think
the first time.
I was never a big John McCain fan or a fan of the Vietnam War and so on, but I always thought John McCain had a lot of integrity for letting others go before him when he was a POW and for surviving that, all of that. I mean, his history is complex. And I was disgusted by his campaign against Obama and his choice of Sarah Palin. But of all the things that John McCain will be remembered for, I think he doesn't get enough credit for the downvote, which which did more than Mitt Romney or any other Republican could have. Like, he saved health care, including my own. I will never forget him for that.
Right.
So anyway, you're making the point about what is your idea for these Republicans?
Yeah, it's here's what's so scary. After what the Republicans have done and enabled, it's 50-50 in the Senate, and the Democrats have what, like a razor thin margin in the House for the House. So in less than 2 years, we could conceivably be in a place where Joe Biden has a Republican House and a Republican Senate. That is the punishment they will pay for enabling Donald Trump for 4 years and an insurrection and trying to overturn an election. So what I think is the right thing to do, and I know they won't do it, but it would be phenomenal to see like a Murkowski, even a Collins, unlikely, a Romney, and then in the House, maybe a Kinzinger or whatever, caucus as an independent with the Democrats to ensure that even if things swing, they don't swing to give control back to the Republicans. Like, can you really imagine that in 2 years we could be sitting here with a Republican Congress literally paying no price historically, electorally? All they'll be able to do, their reward for trying to overthrow an election will be to stifle Joe Biden for 2 years. That's unconscionable. And I don't know if I made it this analogy on your show or somewhere else, but like with the fruit of the poisonous tree in criminal law, where if the cops beat a confession out of somebody, or they plant evidence, or they don't obey the Fourth Amendment proper procedures, you can throw that. The judge throws that evidence out, not because the guy's innocent. He might be guilty.
No, if you torture a confession out of a suspect.
Huh?
If you torture a confession out of a suspect.
But I'm just saying there's many different ways of throwing out evidence, like a faulty photo array.
Right.
There's all sorts of various things that, because what the criminal justice system is saying, and with that exclusionary rule, is basically saying we have to punish you to protect the system. This guy may actually be guilty. You might have planted evidence on this guy because you knew it. Maybe you saw him do it. We can't allow you to plant evidence because the system is bigger than one case. So there has to be a disincentive for you to break Fourth Amendment rules and constraints. With Trump, if we go back, like, I feel like it's almost an exclusionary type rule. If the Republicans can take over Congress in less than 2 years after this, they have paid no price. They've paid no price, period. They should have to go through some sort of truth and reconciliation Mandela apartheid shit before they can get power again after this. Like, this is, and the idea of them getting back in power, the same fucking people. That we might be sitting here with Russ, Ron Johnson,
he's
heading up a committee in 2 years.
Yep.
That's somehow bothers me more than even what just happened, is that there will be no accountability. And then if you're a Republican and you're heading a committee 23 months from now, do you really see any price to becoming an extremist? No.
I think that's a really important view and an interesting idea about potentially Republican senators caucusing as independents, caucusing with Democrats as independents. I mean, keep voting to the right of Joe Manchin. Nobody's telling you to vote different, but you ensure that the power of the committee, you ensure that it will still be Democrats in 2023 or 2025 running committees, even if you're not voting for them, because I think the idea that there will be no price to pay for this disgraceful note in history. I think one thing that is changing, and it's hard to quantify, and I could be entirely wrong, but the deplatforming not only of some of the major influencers from the president on down to Mike Lindell, but I think of just getting rid of these QAnon theories and trying to get rid of them as fast as they come up on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. I think that's extremely positive development. I could be wrong. That could backfire. But I wonder how these theories are going to continue to be able to survive if Trump can't scream them to his cult followers and if they can't be shared by all of them on Facebook and so on. I think this is a major development, and I'm not saying that the Republican Party is necessarily going to get more serious, but combine that with the lawsuits against Fox News and other conservative outlets for, against
I love those. I really love those lawsuits.
Dominion and Smartmatic, I think they are.
Those are great.
I think that it's going to take a few months at least to see what effect the kind of deplatforming will take. But what is your reaction to that right now? Do you agree with me, or do you think that it's all the crazy continues even though they're being clamped down by social media networks or deplatformed altogether?
I guess it's complicated because I have two thoughts on that. One is obviously not giving oxygen to these things. I have to assume the people who are hardcore, the oath keepers, the 3%ers, these types of people, they're going to be finding this shit. They're going to be sharing it. They're going to be going wherever they have to get this kind of hate and misinformation.
And by the way, they have meeting places. The ones you just named, they have barns. They meet up. The FBI has been following like the left forever with surveillance. We follow fucking every Muslim at every mosque. Could we start clamping down on their weekend gatherings? Go ahead. Sorry.
No. They, next thing you know, somebody's kicking down the door to your shed going, we found one.
I fit the bill. I'm in a shed that looked like this.
But I think what I hope, even though I don't really believe this, what I hope is that if you cut down the sort of information floating around different places, some of those less hardcore people will be exposed to less. I guess that'd be a good thing. But when you look at OAN and Newsmax, I don't think you really like these channels are really fucking disgusting. And what I worry about is I said this on a podcast earlier today. I said, it's hard for me to believe when New York CNN was interviewing a woman who was a QAnon person, and she's sort of, coming out and being like, I was duped. I feel like an idiot. I really thought all this was true. But she says things when I hear, I was just, I'm a Christian. I supported Donald Trump, but I didn't look into, and I already go, okay, so you're not that great a person already. Like, I'm sorry, like, I know you can't do that. People say, oh, you can't do that. But I go, no, I'm like, that's what bothers me is that when people act like supporting Donald Trump is like, yeah, I'm a classic Republican. I support the racist rapist who goes around bragging and insulting everybody and has no experience in government. Yeah, it's the old De Niro quote from Casino when he says he fires a guy for fucking up the slot machines. And he says, paraphrasing, either you're in on it or you're too stupid. Either way, I can't have you. In other words, there are so many people out there that if you are so susceptible to QAnon, how can I really help you? Like, where are we going to meet? Yeah. You're either so dumb and like vapid or like empty, such an empty vessel that I don't know what to do with you, or there's a core to you that's really suspicious and suspect and some cruelty, some hypocrisy, some racism, like a nice GOP gumbo that like, what are we really going to reach out? And I think when people say there aren't 74 million racists in this country, I go, and a friend of mine tweeted this and I remember retweeting, I said, why are we so sure that a quarter of a country that supports a racist president and has deep historical racist stuff can't have 25% of people be racist? Like, I actually don't understand why that can't be a thing.
I would, depending on what the threshold for how
and by the way, we're excluding the left, which of course has bigots and people who are, whether they be paternalistic or outright racist, they just have their own agendas. So we're just counting the Trump supporters. They are either racist or they are okay with racism as a byproduct of supporting what they do. And at the end of the day, if you're empowering the people who are racist, you're not doing much different to my life. Like, in other words, if you are racist or you just caucus with the racists, how are you, like, what are you doing that's so, like, is there really a difference if you're empowering terrible people, but you only do it for the tax cuts? I don't really get what the difference is.
Well, the most racist thing you can do is make it harder for people of color to vote. That's the most, or support people who would make it harder for people of color to vote. That's it. If you don't support restoring the Voting Rights Act, then you're a racist. Now, if you don't know what that is and don't know that you're not supporting it, okay, that's ignorance. But once I explain to you what it is and how it became part of our country's history and law and how it got gutted, and then I say we need to restore it, if you're still against it, then you're not on the right side of the issue. Let me ask you about cancel culture before we go. Yeah. This is a phrase that gets so overused and misplaced, and I don't know if I have got you ranting on it before, I forget, and even if I have, it's worth getting you going again on it. I'm sure. I think it's interesting, especially someone with your intelligence, your education, your ethnic background, and most importantly, being a comedian. I think comedians talking about this are interesting and important, but often also off base and wrong. And finally, I just think it's way too talked about. I think climate policy, tax policy, you name it, anything is more important to talk about. So even if it is an issue, it's really not affecting that many people. What are your thoughts on it and how much attention it gets?
It does get a lot of attention. I think the Republicans, honestly, don't realize how they're hurting their cause to create cancel culture into this martyrdom weapon where they get to be the victims of cancel culture and thereby the heroes of their own story, martyrs to the left-wing mob, because they're using it for everything. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if Donald Trump doesn't get reelected, he's a victim of cancel culture. Right. If Marjorie Taylor Greene can't say racist, anti-Semitic, stupid things, it's cancel culture.
You can't take your dick out at work.
Right. Like, I think they're using it. They're overusing it. I think the left sometimes overused it to start with. And then the right just decided, hey, we should just call everything we don't like cancel culture. Mm-hmm. Anytime there's repercussions for something, we'll call it cancel culture. So I think it's gonna wear everybody out. I don't know. I think there's, I think, was it you who said you're fired, right? You said it's not cancel culture, the phrase, it's you're fired.
You're fired needs to be used more often than like people are saying they're getting canceled, but no, they're just getting fired from their job, or, there's a lot of, every situation scenario is important to take on a case-by-case basis, but I just think it's just way overused.
It is.
I don't like the idea. I just heard recently of here's an interesting one, of a woman who has spent her entire life, a white woman, as a scholar researching and lecturing about Black literature. And she's been run out of her job because she's a white woman by younger, woke, white and Black students. That's, what she was telling me. And I was like, you can't, that seems too much for me. I don't know if that fits in this conversation, but it's fresh in my mind. But, just the idea that I just think it's overplayed. I just would rather talk about other things. And I think comedians really overplay it.
No, comedians definitely do, because I think in comedy, there seems to be, I'd love to do like if I didn't have anything else to do with my life, I'd do like a sociology experiment or a psych experiment where I interview, white comedians in their early 40s, late 30s and early 40s. And we figure out, we factor out, we set them by success levels, like how much money did you, so that we eliminate other factors, like were you successful in your late 20s?
Control for success.
Control for success, yes. And I think you'd find a lot of people.
And generational wealth.
Right. If you find people who had success, I see it with a lot of them, success in maybe their early 30s, late 20s, and then like kind of just plateaued. Cancel culture and hating the left becomes like an easy win. It's kind of an easy win for comedians. And I remember I watched a few of Tiffany Haddish put up a new series of short stand-up specials on Netflix. And one of them was Godfrey, who I'm a fan of.
I love Godfrey. He's a good buddy of mine. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Godfrey. Paid to see him early in my career. You know, I'm that type of person. So I find him very funny, but I don't know if the crowd was mostly black, and it was filmed during an election year, but he kind of came out with I think all politicians are full of shit.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. But there was no clapter from the audience. And I thought to myself, I was like, if this was a black audience, because the lineup was black, Tiffany Haddish is black, it could have been a mixed audience. But if it was leaning African-American, I thought to myself, yeah, that might work in the Comedy Cellar, where you might have like a mix of people who are like, yeah, comedy, we got to protect comedy because anytime somebody criticizes something, fuck them. But it didn't get shit. Like he went on to jokes, but like there was dead silence to his kind of politicians are full of shit. Right?
I gotta watch that. One of the things that he does that I like and don't want to stop is all of his accents. He does different. You know, you do this too. Accents and people of different backgrounds, and that's now called cultural appropriation. I'm uncomfortable with all of that stuff. I think that you should be able to tell a story and do the voice of the people who are there. And if the person had this accent and you're doing it, you're not necessarily being insulting. You're just doing characters and putting texture and character to a story. That's in the history of storytelling. You did different voices. You embodied different people, and Godfrey's good at that. And
he'll mock Nigerians first to sort of be like, look, I'm doing this kind of.
Does he do it that way? Yeah, he's Nigerian American.
Yeah, but it's. I'll give you an example, a better example of what I think is wrong with cancel culture. Now, Dave Chappelle, and I'm of the opinion that I can't make you like my comedy, but I have a much higher threshold for whether you tell me I can do a joke or not. You know what I mean? There are people who say, I don't think that's funny. Yeah. And I go, that's fine.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to find me funny. Sure. But if you go, delete that, that's out of bounds. And I'm like, not really. Like I have a joke I'm working on about Evan Rachel Wood, who came out and said that Marilyn Manson was grooming her, abusive during the relationship. Like when she was 18, she was dating him. And did you hear any of this?
No.
Oh, it was a big story, I think, last week. But in other words, she named her accuser as Marilyn her abuser as Marilyn Manson.
Okay, I did hear something about that. Yeah, so I remember giggling to myself, like, "Wow, that guy's abusive." Like,
no. Thank you.
Unfortunately, he dresses as a vampire, and I think that doesn't help his cause. But
the joke that I did was, I've been working on it for stand-up shows, but on Twitter, basically the gist of it was, let me put it to you this way, though. I'm not blaming the victim here, but if I were walking down the street and saw Marilyn Manson, I would cross the street. If you look at Marilyn Manson as an attractive 18-year-old woman and say, I need that dick, you might be coming to the relationship with some pre-existing baggage. And of course, people are like, you don't understand grooming. You don't. And I go, no. You don't. This is a joke. This is not me actually saying she's a liar. Right. But the joke here is that we look at, I've added to it. I'm now turning it into a bit where I'm like, you mean the guy who looks like a demon from my nightmares is abusive? The guy who the school shooters enjoyed listening to pre-shooting, this guy was abusive? And you just go through these different, nobody could have known this, Evan. Okay, nobody could know this except probably your whole family and all your friends. No, because the joke is that he's creepy looking. I'm not calling her a liar, but there's people who want to jump on that and go, this is a bad take. Well, and I wrote to this woman, I said, maybe it's a bad take, but I'm not giving you a take. I'm giving you a joke. And not to cut you off, but that just reminded me of Dave Chappelle. Several years ago, he did a bit on a Netflix special where he talked about somebody, whether it was Caitlyn Jenner or somebody, walking into a meeting, cutting off their dick and throwing it on the table. And I remember laughing hysterically at that, even though the way he did it, even though I knew this was going to offend some people, but I thought that's a funny joke. but I'm also not going to be bothered if some people are offended.
Right.
He does a special on Broadway, and I wrote about this on my website in late 2019, where he began doing this thing where he was griping about, and he would say the F word with extra venom.
Chappelle.
And I really think it was him. And he did this bit about how he wanted to say the F word during Chappelle's show, and Standards and Practices said no. And he said, but you're okay with the N, like he says, but you're okay with the N word. And there was clapping from the audience, clapping. And I sat there and I wrote this up. I said, I liked the show. I respect Dave Chappelle immensely. And I liked the jokes that he was getting criticized for a few years ago. I admit that I liked them, but this was not a joke. This was him doing a little bit of a lecture on, and it was such a false premise because he was equating a black man saying the N word in his comedy with him saying the F word. And he was then equating like, I can't say the F word, but you're okay with the N word. Like as if they had a bunch of white dudes saying it on Comedy Central. And the crowd was like, yes, because they clapped. They didn't laugh. And I hate that. Like when you get too much clapping at a stand-up show, you're doing something wrong. But he was doing this thing where he was kind of giving permission to his fans, who I get into this argument all the time. And we discussed it on the Zoom with the fans, Zoom happy hour.
Yep.
There is this desire to say the F word like it doesn't, as if because the N word has more violence and more history behind it, that the F word is like a junior slur, not deserving of the same rigorous attention. I disagree. There have been people murdered with using that word. That word is used to hurt with violence and with emotion. And I just thought to myself, Dave Chappelle, you're up there. You're smarter than that. You obviously can see you're doing a false equivalency. In other words, you're saying you're okay with us. You're okay with the N word. No, they're okay with you saying the N word, not with the N word, but because you can't say the F word, you're now turning this into, and I think this is happens when you hang out with like rich libertarians too much. You start to, I saw it creeping into Bill Burr's stand up just a touch. And with Chappelle, I think you know who I'm talking about, a very big platform that you may or may not have been on at one point.
Well, there's a lot of guys like that besides Rogan. Yeah.
No, I know, but he is, it's this vibe of like, yeah, I'm mostly cool, but I lean right and freedom is like,
it's,
but when Chappelle did that, I lost a little bit of respect, just a little bit, because I thought you're not even telling a joke, by the way. You're doing this in lecture format to like pat yourself on the back, but you have fans out there who are going to go and say, yeah, F word isn't like the N word. And if I, you know what I mean? But it was such a failure of like an SAT analogy that I just was so disappointed, because you have to know that's not the same thing. But it was like you were manipulating the crowd, many of whom probably want to say the F word as well. Don't view it as the same level of slur.
I think that is, I remember you writing about it and thinking, well, this is really thoughtful analysis. And it is, as you just shared. I think that's a great point about that whole story and those two words. And I'm glad that you brought that up. Now, getting back to, you brought him
meanwhile,
up.
Comedy Central, I will say this, had a show that the main character was gay. And there was a lot of aggressive gay sex and gay slurs, like used among gay characters. And I thought, that's the counter, Dave.
Right. They let them, yes.
That's the, like, your case is done. Your case is over. This whole, I'm a victim because they won't let me use someone else's slur. It was called like The Middle One, or not The Middle One, but it was about two older siblings of like a Justin Bieber type child. Like he was like a kid star and they were the older siblings. And I don't know that they used slurs necessarily, but it was the kind of show that was a very aggressive take on gay culture, that had it been straight people making the show or starring in the show, you would have had major complaints. because it was very aggressive. It was going there in a way that would only be accepted if coming from gay voices.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't find it. I was looking it up, but
you to me, there's this in comedy. There's this. If Dave Chappelle does it, you can imagine how many mid-level and low-level comedians want to cloak themselves in cancel culture also. Yep. But he wasn't even making a genuine case. My distinction is always, I'm going to need a very high threshold before I listen to you on what I can and can't try to joke about. I'm going to try and joke about almost anything. That doesn't mean you have to find it funny. But I also think that this new thing of like lecturing audiences on why you're a hero instead of doing it with your comedy is very annoying. And I think treating it like you've been canceled because people didn't like your joke. You're not canceled. You're doing 8 shows on Broadway and you have 2 more Netflix specials coming out. Exactly. But some people found it offensive. And I can agree in a weird way with both. And maybe that wouldn't be good enough for some people. They're like, so you find it offensive, but you think he should still say it? And my answer is like, barring a Kramer incident, I'm pretty good with anybody trying anything on a comedy stage if they're really trying to be funny.
On a comedy stage are the key words, which I've been saying for years. And I said it similarly, but a little different than what you just did. But yeah.
But the way Chappelle said the F word in one of his, he really put some stank on it. And it bothered me.
Yeah.
Because it was really, if a white comic, a great white comic, not named Nick DiPaolo, somebody who says it less in their private life. No, I'm just kidding. Maybe, probably not. But if Bill Burr got on stage and Louis C.K. got away with it, people have a problem with it now, and I am okay with that. But he never used the word as I'm just talking and using it flippantly.
Right.
It was like still part of comedy.
Do you think, lastly, you mentioned this earlier, and I don't know the whole case, but the New York Times reporter McNeil, Don McNeil, is that his name? Yeah. He's just been canceled because the story was he's just been fired / canceled because he, I just did it myself, apparently said the N-word while accompanying some kids, but apparently he was talking about the word. Like, I don't know what the story is, but they fired him. He's one of the most respected
science journalists at a time with COVID. He's like their guy
on COVID. Yeah, he's been everywhere on Rachel Maddow and on the front page of the New York Times several times. What do you know about that case, and what do you think about it?
I do. I wish I would like somebody to come out with a full sort of definitive report with all context, because what I read today is some people are making it out, which is how I thought of it, as like, so he said the N-word, but it was in context of describing a story where someone was in trouble for using the N-word. Like, he wasn't calling somebody, get over here, you N-word. But what I read in some tweets, and this is the problem, I'm getting information on this from tweets, was that there are other incidences in his career, maybe not involving racial slurs, but involving offensive or dismissive racial comments that were sort of in the context show a general insensitivity. Once again, that's what I'm hearing, because to me, it seems like it would be crazy for him to be fired.
Yeah.
If you want to suspend him and say you showed poor judgment, especially on a trip with students, but it feels like there must have been more here in terms of the culture around him, or like the way he generally acted. I don't know, but it would seem, if it was just the one thing, it would seem like that would be excessive. And from what I read, there were other things he's said and done in the past that maybe had a little bit more of a cumulative effect than just one bad incident. I was surprised though. And if it was just, like I said, I would say if it was just the one incident, I would be like, no. But to be fair, Papa John's got booted for exactly that, which, even though Papa John's is a douchebag Republican making bad pizza, he was fired for that, for telling a story where someone used it. And he wasn't using it in like a, ha ha ha, listen to this funny story. It was like a a training session or something on, you know what I mean? Like he was using
it was
it
on
in
a conference call or something.
But I think it involved like
Shaq. I think it involved Shaq. And no, I'm just kidding. I'm just thinking of him because didn't they like hire him to fix the PR? Or was he already spoke? Like I feel like he said the N-word, got fired.
We got the largest black man on the planet to cover
one of the most
up.
likable black guys out there to be the spokesman.
But it was one of those things where when I heard that story, it was easy to be like, well, fuck Papa John and his Trump-loving ass. But to be honest, you can say that. I don't know why people don't say the N-word. I don't get why that's the easy way out is just to say the N-word or the N train if you're in Queens. But what I don't get is that still shouldn't be like you can lose your job if you were using it in the proper context. Right. You certainly could talk to somebody and be like, just not trying to be a jerk. Next time, say the N-word, please. Like that. Yeah. It was a little jarring. Yeah. And then if the guy goes, "Go fuck you, you lib jerk," then maybe you send it up the chain or whatever. You have a decision to make. But it feels like if somebody's saying, yes, during the assault, the so-and-so, there was a reporter somewhere, I think I remember hearing the story, that was fired for repeating the word in a news story. Oh. And like, those are things where you're like, that. Yeah, that's yes, we could be more sensitive, but on the flip side, we could be a little less draconian if context matters. Like this is
that's often the problem, that context doesn't matter, which is why we should always be searching for as much context in any of these situations. That I'm for. All right. Thank you very much. Great talking to you. As always, we covered a lot of ground. And, of course, the plugs for the dates are in the show notes. But just in case people don't go listen to them, this week, people are to watch you performing stand-up comedy and a very special Trump show.
Yeah, Trump farewell show. The stand-up comedy show is Saturday, February 13th at 5 p.m. Eastern. So either if you're on the West Coast, a nice afternoon show. If you're in Europe, which is the reason why I made the show so early, it's a nice nighttime show.
European fans were asking you, what country were they asking you from?
It was several UK people had asked for it. So
a big British following, and they wanted you to do it at an appropriate hour.
All nine of them wanted a show.
Make a difference.
And then the other show is a Trump farewell kind of one-man show sort of thing on President's Day at 7 p.m. Eastern. So in the show notes, the link has ticket links to both shows. I guarantee you a great time at both. Yeah, and that's it. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, buddy. There he goes, JL Cauvin. Definitely check him out. Hire him to do a cameo for one of your friends. Tell him you heard him here. He often joins us on our Zoom Hangouts because he's a listener and supporter of stand-up and a longtime friend of mine from our days doing stand-up, where I used to open for him. Now he used to open for me. I think I'm going to be opening for him. Well, I hope. We'll see what happens for JL when the world returns to normal and people start going out to live performances again. Again, February 13th, his Zoom stand-up show, and February 15th, his President's Day farewell show. And you can always buy his albums, do a private corporate Zoom, and so much more. JLCauvin.com is his website. And that's all I've got for you today on a Monday. I hope you're hanging in there, my friends. I hope to see you on Thursday night. I hope that you'll support the podcast with a paid subscription. See, I'm not taking ads, and this is actually my job. This is how I'm supporting my family from the shed. Every day I post new podcasts. They take hours to produce, to edit, to host, of course, and I'm counting on your support. The podcast is free, but it's not cheap, and so if you could sign up now for a paid subscription, go to patreon.com/PeteDominic or go to the paid subscription link in the show notes, and you can see the benefits of being a member of our community, joining our chats, hanging out on the Discord platform anytime. And I'm hoping to go live soon with the show, doing a once-a-week live show and doing the show on Twitch, and I've got all kinds of ideas. I finally bought a new camera that I'm trying to figure out, so I'm very excited, but I could use your support. Thank you very much. I love you. You're not alone, even though you might feel like it. You're not. and reach out and try to connect with someone. That's what we're trying to do every day with the stand-up community. And I'll talk to you tomorrow right here on Stand Up. Take it away, John Carroll.
Your fence, even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense, and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. The place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up, got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up, people got the power. Stand up. Come on, 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 stand up.
Hello, show enders. Here now, a final clip. Former Secretary of State George Shultz, who died at age 100, talking about clean energy in 2012 with Stanford University.
It's not a matter of opinion, it's a matter of fact that the globe is warming. We should be looking at ways to lessen our dependence on oil at all. And that's why I like my electric car, a Nissan Leaf. You're going to talk about this subject, you got to walk the talk. You got to do it yourself. You just take the plug out, put that over the thing, put that in. I use it practically every day. Go over to campus and back, or over to the shopping center, the golf course, or wherever I want to go, no problem. Done. I could drive it up to San Francisco, get in the car, and I'm all set to go. I have solar panels on the roof of my house here at Stanford. They've long since paid for themselves by the savings in electricity costs. And I have my electric car running on electricity from the sun, which costs me nothing, and there's plenty of it here. So I'm driving on sunshine. Take that, Ahmadinejad. Gas station, you asked me about a gas station. What's that? And you talk to the guys at Stanford or MIT or elsewhere who are working on batteries, you just know 5 years from now, they're going to be a lot better. So we're getting somewhere. And it's important to keep that going. Keep the pressure on for R&D. What you do today is going to have a big impact on the future. I have 3 and soon to be 4 great-grandchildren. So I'm thinking I've got to do what I can to see that they have a decent world. And if we let this go on and on the way it's going right now, they're not going to have one.